Hi, I'm John Zidan. This is my co-host, Harry Kimes. Welcome to another edition of Retirement Matters. Well, today our discussion is going to be about a topic that I think is very, very important to a lot of people. And we're going to call it Get a Second Opinion. Why do you suppose that's important, Harry?
Well, I think, like anything else, you go to a doctor and he wants to suggest you have major surgery. You certainly want to make sure that he's made the right diagnosis, so you go get a second opinion. I think that applies in finances as well. We've accumulated our money for retirement. We want to protect it, take care of it, and making sure that we've got good advice makes sense. So, having a second opinion on the items that, the way that you handle your money certainly makes sense. But I guess my question is, if you don't have a lot of exposure to the financial community, how do you go about getting a second opinion? How would you do that?
Well, I think the first couple things what you have to do, number one, is you have to understand the different areas that we're dealing with. And one of the things that I try to do at retirement first, when a person comes in and they're coming to me, you want to get to the point, if you go to visit somebody, you're not going to someone that's just immediately trying to sell you something. So the first thing you want to do when you're going out and you're searching and you're trying to change some things because things aren't exactly working in your favor, you really want to look for somebody that is going to give you what I classify as education, give you a good schooling and said, my product's better than yours, this is better than this, you need to do this, you need to do this. Because in today's age, everybody has a product, everybody has something they want to sell. And so the first thing in education, the three things people should be concerned about if they're close to retirement or they're going to retire is number one, what happens if I live too long? Do I have that covered? Okay. What happens if I die too quick? Do I have all my affairs in order? If I die too quick, is my spouse, is my children going to be okay? And the most important, what if I don't die, too quick? And what if I don't live too long, but instead I get disabled and I'm still living and my spouse is still healthy? Now I've got a situation on my hands I didn't quite plan for. So the first thing we want to do in a second opinion, we're going to go over the areas that are very, very important. If I live too long, I die too quick, or I become disabled. Now, getting a second opinion involves a lot of different things that we need to do. And the first thing we need to do is we need to go over areas of things that we may have, okay? And what things could we be possibly thinking of, Harry, that we might have that we might want to get a second opinion on?
Well, if I put a checklist together that I would want to use to, compare financial advisors, I'd probably start out with something like maybe probate. What do I need to worry about in the area of probate?
Probate. The first thing you want to understand is that's a good one, because so many times we have all the time in the world until it ends like that. And one of the things you have to be careful with, and a lot of times the attorneys go to school to learn how to do probate. That's their job, they're good at it. But my thing is, what can we do to help people so that in the event someone dies, maybe we don't have 10 to 15 attorneys standing around in line waiting to help somebody. So it's important that you have to have attorneys there to help you with your estate, but you can do some due diligence. You can do some things that can protect you. And the first thing that I ask people to do is, if you have a checking account, or you have a savings account, or a CD, or a mutual fund, or a bond, or a deed, you want to make sure that the assets are titled correctly. So that's number one. So on your checklist, take a list and write down every single thing you have, from your CD, your savings account, your checking account, your mutual funds, your 401k, your IRA, your life insurance. Make sure your house, your deed, make sure your car, every single thing is written on that list, number one.
Okay. Well, the other thing that certainly is getting a lot of press these days is the healthcare situation, and Medicare certainly comes to mind for those of us approaching retirement or approaching 65 or already 65. So there's certainly going to be questions around that, and I think that would be on the checklist as well.
Second thing I would say is your health insurance, you know, Medicare, long-term care insurance, major medical, very important. And one of the biggest things people have to do is make sure they understand what they have. Because so many times, maybe the husband is older, and maybe the wife isn't as old as the husband. So he goes to retire. He doesn't really understand. He thinks his major medical might stay with him, but in reality, in a lot of cases, Harry, he would get the insurance, but she doesn't get the insurance. And now she's got to wait till she's 64 and a half to apply for Medicare, which means there's a little bit of a loophole in the middle between there where that could become very important. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go to your human resource department of where you're working, and you want to say, in the event that I decide to retire, does my insurance stay with me for major medical? Okay, are you offering it? Number two, or does it end? Some places you don't have it anymore. Or do I have to go on COBRA? And COBRA is something that in most cases will last for 36 months. Maybe someone's close to retirement, and maybe they decide to switch jobs and think, you know, I'll work here for a couple years. Very important to understand if they make a move like that, COBRA will cover them, you know, for 36 months in some situations, which would be a divorce situation. But in most likelihood, COBRA is something that was put in place that's around 18 months. And then after 18 months, you have to find a new insurance company. So if you're not 64 and a half, and you decide to go to another job, or you decide to retire, make sure the company's still going to give you the major medical and the wife is still going to get the major medical. Or is there going to be a loophole, you know, basically between the age brackets, between maybe you're 64, close to 65, your wife's 57, 59. We see a lot of that these days. And so you want to ask the human resource department, do I keep my major medical, or are you going to offer me a Medicare supplement? And that's usually important, because if they offer him a Medicare supplement, what are they offering her? She's not ready for a Medicare supplement. So important, make sure you call the human resource department and find out your insurance options.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. That brings me to another item on the checklist then, as we talk about health care. You know, I read somewhere that about 50% of us will end up in a nursing home at some point in our life, and nursing homes aren't getting less expensive. If anything, they're going up every day. So I guess many of us could be thinking about the need for Medicaid, and there's a lot of questions about Medicaid, and a lot of these states are running out of money. So is Medicaid a viable option? What should we be looking at there?
Medicaid used to work a little bit different for people. And the idea with Medicaid was that if you needed assistance and you were still middle class or something, you could still protect some of your assets and still apply for Medicaid. Recently, there was a new law that came into effect. I believe it was 2007. It's called the Deficit Reduction Act, which kind of changed the playing field for Medicaid. And I don't want to get into a whole program on Medicaid, but I just want to give some people some basics. And the basics you're looking for in Medicaid is, number one, some of the basic rules that have changed. The first rule that changed when you're dealing with Medicaid used to be if you had IRAs for you or your spouse, that you could have your IRAs and your husband or you could apply for Medicaid. The new law basically says that qualified money, IRAs, 401ks, savings accounts, checking accounts, mutual funds, bonds, what have you, will be spent down for the person going into the facility to apply for Medicaid, which is about $1,500. The second area of concern, the spend down period has been changed from 36 months to 60 months. So that means if I apply for Medicaid, what I have to do is I have to make sure that my assets are not in my name for a period of up to 60 months from the date that I apply for the Medicaid application. The other big issue is if I'm single or I'm divorced or I'm a widow, maybe I fall and I slip on the ice. something happens to me and I have to go into the nursing home because maybe my family isn't in the same state, if I go in maybe for a short stay, 12 months or 18 months, that after 6 months of being into Medicaid, I'm going to have my heirs get some type of letter acknowledging that I have to put my house up for market, because once you've been under Medicaid for 6 months, Medicaid is going to basically say, you got to put your house up if you want to continue to stay here, because there's really nothing there for widows, divorcees, or single people, because they don't have a husband and wife together. Because the rule still is, if you're married and you're a husband and wife and you both occupy the premises and one of you go in the nursing home, they cannot attach any type of lien to the property of the house until the second person is no longer living in the house. So that's kind of nice. But remember, if you're still married, the 6-month deal is still going to be put a lien on the property. It just means that they can't deal with enacting the lien until either one of them are no longer occupying the house. When there's 2 people and they no longer occupy the house, the government can come in and go ahead with the lien. So that's kind of important. We'll have another session on Medicaid, but those are the 2 critical areas. Make sure that if you're trying to avoid Medicaid, someone's starting to become ill, you want to make sure that the assets are not in your name within a 60-month period, and make sure that you understand what the spend down period is. It's 60 months, it's not 36 months. If you're a divorcee or a widow or single person, be careful making sure that you've got your house taken care of. Another thing we'll talk about is a life estate. A life estate is something that you can go to an attorney and have the house transferred to someone you want to leave as a beneficiary. And of course, once 60 months has went by, the house would be protected. Upon your death, the house would go to the person that you went to the life estate, but there'd be no court, no creditors, no divorces or coming back and taking the house. They continue to live in the house until both the husband and the wife are deceased.
Well, with the changes that we keep hearing about and the new Medicare, new health care program that Congress just passed, it seems that probably we should do all we can to protect ourselves going forward. And you know, long-term care, I think, kind of falls into that category. Long-term care can be pretty expensive, but when is a good time for an individual to start looking and thinking about long-term care, and how can that help protect them during their later years in life?
I would say, you know, that's very important that we make sure that we put number 3, long-term care, on the list, because it used to be, Harry, that I'm not going into a nursing home. You know, don't ever put me in a nursing home. I'll take a revolver, you know, and I'll take care of it. And the answer is no, okay? It's changed. Things have evolved in the industry. Now if something happens, you can get care, not just for the nursing home. They have adult daycare, they have rehabilitation care, they have home health care. It's all together. So if your children are not in the same state, you can purchase a policy that will continue to bring people into your house, giving you the independency that you're looking for. But I would say probably start somewhere in your 50s, because the cheaper that you decide at your age to start pursuing long-term care, the better. Because if you start to get long-term care at 85 versus 50, the companies are realizing, based on mortality rates and how long they're going to be on the hook to pay for a claim, they're going to make sure that they adjust the premium accordingly. So getting long-term care at an early age is something that's important, so that it's not going to be that expensive as opposed to when you're older. Now, for the people out there that are older, we've always heard, oh man, long-term care is ridiculous, you know, it's going to bankrupt me. Not necessarily so. There's a lot of moving parts to long-term care insurance. And one of the things we have to deal with that is agents that sell long-term care insurance are going to try to sell the highest premium they can, obviously, because they make the highest commission. One of the things you want to do is you want to go to somebody and you want them to, before they talk about product, explain what is involved with buying a nursing home or home health care policy, and what are all the moving parts and what makes something expensive. Example, I could drive a Beamer, or I can drive a station wagon, or I can drive a Volkswagen. Now I'm still going to get to where I need to go in a Volkswagen. station wagon, I can put a little more people in there. And a BMW, while I'm driving people, I can listen to some pretty cool music, you know, depending upon what the sound system is. I'm still going to get to where I have to go. So we don't necessarily have to buy the Beamer in order to have insurance. It's based on bells and whistles. And so one of the things that I tell people is make sure that you have somebody that educates you. And actually there's a guide that goes out called the LTC guide that you should just ask the agent, could I please see the LTC guide that was put out by, you know, the state of Ohio, which has all the important questions, what to look for in an LTC policy, home health care. You know, what are the areas of concern that I should be looking for? And if you have a long-term care on your checklist, get a second opinion, get to someone. I do seminars at Retirement First every Tuesday, the first Tuesday of every month. And the whole idea is designed so that I can go into those sessions and educate people and tell the people, you know, the things that they're not getting. They're mostly getting products and brochures, and anyone can make a nice glossy brochure. But if we educate the people out there and we teach the people, you know, what are the parts that are so important and critical to putting together a good long-term care. I mean, how many people went to seminars and been scared, you know, because the premium comes, yay, that's it, game over, okay? And it doesn't have to be that way. There are very important things to long-term care insurance that can help you. Again, you can call Retirement First at 1-800-82-FIRST anytime you'd like. We have set up the videos, okay, pertaining to what we're doing now. We make sure we have videos on all the subjects. We have subjects on Medicare. We have subjects on Medicaid. We have subjects on the stock market. We have subjects on bonds. We have subjects on all the areas that are important. Now you can sit in the privacy of your own home, turn me off if I talk too fast, put me on pause, rewind me, fast forward, you know, pretty much the perfect husband, really. You know, you can pretty much do what you want to do. And that's important to get the information that you're looking for. So on that, if you have long-term care insurance, maybe call up your company and ask them, does my policy protect me from the Deficit Reduction Act? Is it long enough to cover the 60 months to where you'll pay the premium for 5 years and possibly give me the ability to transfer my money to my kids if I know that there's a prevailing illness that's going to be something serious, okay, to protect me? So I would basically say make sure you do your due diligence.
Very good. Well, the other thing that I think a lot of people will be thinking about and wanting to ask when they sit down with an advisor is, what if I want to continue to keep working after retirement? I'm ready to retire. I don't want to work full-time. Maybe I'd like to do some part-time work. What's the tax implications? And I think those are things that people don't totally understand, and certainly want to get information when they sit down to talk about their retirement.
Well, I actually had a seminar, and it was amazing because I had a lot of people in there that were 52, 53, 54, 55. And one of the #1 questions I asked the people is I said, are you aware that if you hit a certain adjusted gross income as a husband and wife, that taxes will be involved on your Social Security? Woo! What? Social Security is free. There's no tax on Social Security. And I said, yes, there is. And people are not aware when they're close to retirement, and maybe they've lost a lot of money in the stock market, what the tax implications of retiring are. It can be very substantial. And one of the guidelines, and again, we have tax line guideline tables at Retirement First. You call us up, we'll be more than happy to send you information on that. But there's guidelines at a certain level, 55% of your Social Security will be taxed. At another certain level, 85% of your Social Security will be taxed, which is added to your adjusted gross income. IRAs, we all know we're taxed. We've all heard about the minimum distribution. But a lot of people have lost a lot of money in the stock market, and maybe the bulk of all their money is a 401k or is an IRA. And so for an example, I go to retire and I think I'm ready to retire, and maybe I'm 55, 65, right? Well, right away, if I'm 65, my life expectancy is going to be 85. It's a long time to go. I have a 401k, and the first thing I want to realize, I might come in a 15% tax bracket or 28% tax bracket. So if I decide to pull $40,000 out to retire, or $30,000, as soon as I pull that money out, it's 100% taxable, Harry. Mm-hmm. So now I have to say, well, if my 401k is 300 and I have it in the stock market, can I really afford to risk it in the stock market? Because 28% of the entire 401k or IRA isn't my money. Mm-hmm. It's the government's. So if I pull 28% out of my investments, out of my 401k, now that's to pay for the taxes for my income. But remember, when I'm pulling the $40,000 out, now I'm pulling more money out of the account to pay for taxes. So I'm really not pulling $40,000 out of my IRA, am I?
No, you're not.
I'm pulling a lot more out. But then next year, when I have to pull $40,000 out, I still have to pull more money out of my IRA. That's 100% taxable. But then I have to pull more money out of my IRA because I pulled 28% of my money last year for income taxes, because qualified money and IRAs and 401ks are 100% taxable. So every year I have an additional income, I'm actually pulling a 1 year behind because I'm constantly paying my taxes. Now put that into perspective and then put in tax on Social Security, and then maybe I have investments, and now I have CDs and savings accounts and checking accounts, and I get a 1099 at the end of the year. Now I've got to add that onto my adjusted gross income. In a very, very short time, I could be in a position where I could start to run out of money. One of my favorite things I try to teach people is, has the fear of dying been replaced with the fear of living too long? Mm-hmm. So that's an area that we will make sure that we would discuss with people in seminars. So if you go to a seminar, kind of look for something that maybe somebody is an expert in the area of helping you for retirement, explaining all the nuts and bolts pertaining to taxation, because it's a very big effect and it should be on your checklist, because it can really hurt you if you don't understand it.
Well, you touched on Social Security and a potential taxes that you could pay on Social Security, and Social Security certainly is going to be a major part of everybody's retirement. It's a key piece of your income when you're in retirement. Is there more information about Social Security that people should be aware of?
Yes, I think one of the biggest things that people need to realize is a lot of people just take for granted that Social Security is going to come to them, and that's not entirely true. So the one thing that you want to do is you want to do a second opinion. You want to make sure, if you're close to retirement or you're not in retirement stage, that you physically want to call up your Social Security, and you want them to send you, what am I eligible for? What will I receive, for Social Security at 62? What will I receive at 65 or 70? Am I eligible? Do I have enough quarters? A lot of people don't realize that they have to have so many quarters, okay, to receive Social Security. That becomes very, very important. And then a lot of people will say, well, I'm not going to take Social Security because I have an additional income. And one of the things I try to tell people is be careful with that, because if you don't take it at 62, you decide to take it at 65 or later, that like from 62 to 65, usually the average, if you give it up, it's going to take you 10 years, okay, in the difference between 62 and 65, because you say, well, I'm going to wait till I'm 65 because the monthly premium's bigger. Mm-hmm. But what about the annual Social Security you're getting? How long does it really take to make up the difference? And that's about 10 years. So because I knew that this subject was so important and having so many people in the seminar, I've decided to try to make this maybe a two-part session, okay? And what that's going to be is we're just getting through your checklist. Make sure you write that checklist down, and we're going to make sure we hit that checklist and make sure you get the answers that you're looking for. And on that checklist, I think the most important thing to do is make sure that you pull out and you dust off those documents, because that's one of the things, Harry, that I found out. People's life insurance policies or their properties or their investments or certain things are kind of put in a back closet. They don't really understand how critical it is to brush those things out and kind of do a little spring cleaning, and make sure that they're aware of certain things, because all of a sudden tomorrow your husband wakes up and he has a stroke. Right. Wow, yesterday it was sunny, the birds were chirping, things were wonderful. He took care of all my financial affairs. Ow! What do I do now? I don't know what I do.
Yeah.
So the phone's going to ring off the hook of people that are going to be more than happy to tell you what to do. But if you get that checklist and you make sure that everything is covered, then you don't really have to worry about the tornado coming in and sweeping you off. And it doesn't have to be that way. So one of the things that I think is so important is we're going to tell you some secrets that are out there in the industry that people don't want you to know. The old situation, as you know, you get a contract, right? If I had $1 for everyone that could actually understand what a contract is, I'd be a rich man pertaining to those issues. But those are some of the subjects that I think we're going to continue with our checklist on our next show and continue with it. One of I think the most important things when you're doing your checklist, you want to make sure, we mentioned earlier about making sure that when you pull everything out, that your assets are titled correctly. The law is passing new IRS regulations every single day. There's a new law out now where you used to be able to write certain documents, pay to the order on death or transfer on the order on death to avoid probate. They've come out with a new law which is called letter of designation. It's something new, and you have a certain point that if you did it the old way, you're okay, but all new things effective of that thing that's going to be titled is going to be called letter of designation. And that's an area, if you don't know about letter of designation, right, and you have a loved one that dies or something happens, you're going to find out, but you're going to find out in the wrong way. So we're going to make sure we get to the correct information on titling your assets correctly in our next show. So until then, keep your ears perked. We will be back with you. I'm John Zidan, and this is my co-host, Harry Kynes, and thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day.